Why did 5 women get locked out of a wedding, while 5 others walked right in? Same night. Same wait. Same lamps at the start. Yet only half the group walked through the door. Jesus told this story, and the sting still lands today since most people assume readiness shows up in a single dramatic moment rather than through months nobody notices. This is the parable of the 10 virgins, sometimes called the 10 bridesmaids. You find the story in Matthew chapter 25. 10 women wait for a groom who takes forever to arrive. 5 run out of oil and 5 do not. Only one group enters the party. Today you learn why no one had oil to spare, what the oil stands for, and why the door stayed shut for good, with no confusing theology and no stiff church language. The story stays plain and clear. Let's set the scene first. Matthew wrote his gospel for a Jewish audience. He wanted to show them Jesus as the promised king they waited centuries for. Scholars place the writing between 80 and 90 AD, decades after Jesus died and rose again. This parable sits inside a section called the Olivet Discourse. Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives while his disciples asked him about the end of the age. He answered with a string of parables. This one lands in the middle of the answer. Jesus taught this parable days before his arrest and crucifixion, when time sat short and every word carried extra weight, since these teachings became some of his final public words before the cross. 10 women show up here, not 2 or 3. In Jewish tradition, 10 adults formed the minimum group needed for public prayer. Jesus picks a group size his audience recognizes right away, and the number signals a normal, everyday gathering, not some rare or shrinking crowd. A crowd this ordinary makes the split down the middle and harder, since half a normal group misses the door, not some tiny unlucky minority. Here is the setup from verse 1. 10 young women take their lamps and head out to meet a bridegroom. 10 young women. A wedding. Lamps. Sounds simple so far. Jewish weddings in this era worked differently than weddings today. A groom would travel to the bride's house, then bring her back to his own home for the celebration. Nobody knew the exact hour he would show up, sometimes arriving late at night. A lookout usually stood along the road, ready to shout the moment the groom's procession came into view, while guests lit small clay lamps fueled by olive oil, then joined a walking procession toward the house. A lamp burning through hours of waiting needed steady fuel, since a flame drains oil fast, and a single lamp without a refill might die out inside 15 minutes. This explains the lamps, since the women needed light for a possible midnight walk. Verse 2 splits the group into 5 labeled wise and 5 labeled foolish. Verse 3 tells you why, since the foolish women bring lamps with no backup oil, while the wise women bring lamps plus jars of oil. Here is the detail people skip over constantly. Every single woman in the story starts with a working lamp, and the difference never sits in the lamp, but in preparation for a long wait. Verse 5 says the groom takes his time, and while he delays, all 10 women grow drowsy and fall asleep. Nobody looks foolish yet at this point, since every single woman sleeps, wise and foolish alike. Now section 2 of the passage. Verse 6 drops the big moment. A cry rings out at midnight. The bridegroom has arrived. Come out and meet him. Picture the scene. A shout cuts through the dark, everyone jolts awake at once, and 10 lamps flicker back to life within seconds. 10 women scramble to check their supply at the exact same moment. 5 find plenty, and 5 find almost nothing left. Verse 7 follows immediately. All 10 women wake up and trim their lamps. Trimming a lamp meant cutting away the burnt wick, letting the flame burn bright again. And here comes the oil problem. Verse 8 brings the panic. The foolish women turn to the wise women and ask for oil. Since their lamps are going out, there sits the moment of crisis. Verse 9 gives the answer nobody wants to hear. The wise women say no. Since splitting the oil would leave both groups short, they tell the foolish women to find a dealer and buy their own supply instead. This line trips people up every single time. Why wouldn't the wise women share their oil? Hold this question, since an answer comes soon. Verse 10 seals the outcome. While the foolish women run off to buy oil, the groom arrives. The ready women walk in with him to the wedding banquet, then someone shuts the door. Verse 11 shows the foolish women returning later, knocking and calling out, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." Verse 12 delivers the hardest line in the whole passage. He answers, "I do not know you." Sit with this line for a second. Not I forgot you. Not I stayed busy. Only I do not know you. Verse 13 closes the story with a warning. Stay alert, since you never know the day or the hour. Now connect the 2 sections together. Section 1 shows preparation, and Section 2 shows the price of skipping preparation. The wedding never waits for anyone who missed the window, and the door never stays open out of pity. Notice how the story never blames the foolish women for falling asleep, since every woman slept. Sleep never counts as a failure here. The failure sits earlier, back at the moment each woman decided how much oil to pack before leaving home. So what does the story mean for your life today? The oil never works as a magic object here. Oil in this story stands for something you build over time. The way a steady relationship with God grows through daily choices, not a last-minute scramble. You never get to borrow someone else's years of prayer the night before a crisis hits, and you never get to borrow another person's faith once your own life runs dry. This sits at the heart of the wise women saying no, since their answer never comes from selfishness, but from honesty. Some things never transfer from one person to another, no matter how badly you want them to. Here comes a practical picture. Picture two students before a final exam. One student studies every week across the whole semester, while the other crams the night before, then asks to borrow the first student's knowledge an hour before the test. Knowledge like this never fits inside a backpack for handoff, but gets built inside your own head, through your own repeated effort. Faith works the same way inside this parable, growing through steady practice, not a favor a friend hands you at the last minute. Here's one more picture. Your phone battery on a packed, chaotic day. A wall outlet does you no good in the middle of an urgent call across town away from any charger, since the charge you need already sits inside the battery, built up hours earlier while you slept. Faith works the same way. The reserve has to sit ready before a crisis ever shows up. Now let's answer two questions people ask constantly about this passage. First question, did the wise women act selfish by refusing to share their oil? No. Read verse 9 again. The wise women point out the oil would run short for everyone if split, so sharing here would have left both groups stuck in the dark. Their refusal never counts as cruelty, but counts as honesty about limits. Some gifts never survive a split without ruining the supply for everyone involved, like a nurse handing over half her medical training to a coworker moments before surgery starts. Training built across years never transfers through a quick conversation in a hallway, and the wise women faced the same wall. Their oil sat too small to stretch across 10 lamps, so honesty beat a false comfort, since a false comfort would have doomed everyone in the room. Second question, why does the groom say, "I do not know you," when these women showed up for the same wedding? This line points beyond a late arrival. Jesus teaches something bigger here. Standing near a wedding never equals belonging to the wedding. A late excuse never undoes months of neglect. And the relationship, or the missing relationship, shows up at the exact moment everything is on the line. Third question, does this parable teach salvation through good works instead of grace? No single parable carries the whole weight of this debate on its own shoulders, since Scripture consistently ties salvation to faith, not to a checklist of tasks finished under pressure. This passage points closer toward authenticity than achievement, since the oil pictures a real working relationship with God, built across time, not a scoreboard of good deeds counted at the door. Let's bring this whole story together now. This lesson opened with a question. Why did 5 women get locked out while 5 others walked right in? The answer sits in events long before midnight, in weeks and months of preparation, not the single dramatic moment everyone remembers. The wise women never carried more intelligence than the foolish women, and they never carried more luck either. They simply built up what they needed before the emergency hit. The foolish women carried good intentions and working lamps, but good intentions never fill an empty jar. They lacked one thing nobody hands over in the final seconds. Readiness never works as a feeling you grab during a crisis, but as a habit you build during quiet, unnoticed weeks. Nobody films those weeks. Nobody claps for them. Yet those quiet weeks decide who walks through the door and who stands knocking outside in the dark. Before you go, read Matthew 25 for yourself. Sit with verses 1 through 13 and notice how ordinary the setup sounds and how sharp the ending lands. Here comes a question for the comments below. What counts as the oil in your own life right now? The thing you keep meaning to build up but keep pushing off? Prayer, scripture reading, an honest conversation with God you keep postponing? Name your answer below, since naming your answer counts as the first real step toward filling the jar. If plain, no fluff Bible teaching helps you, subscribe for next week's lesson. Together we keep working through Scripture one passage at a time, one plain explanation at a time, one clear application at a time, no jargon, no filler. The text, and what the text asks of you this week.